Hard wax oils have become the most popular woodworking finishes on the internet, but there are new products in the market that claims all of the same benefits, including an easy application process, and it cuts the drying time from days to literally seconds. In this video, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about the craze of ultraviolet curing products in your shop and test it to see if this is the next big thing in woodworking and how you can start using it on the cheap because, spoiler alert, this stuff can cost thousands of dollars. This video is sponsored by Carbon Method. One of the ultraviolet curing products that flew right under my radar until this year has been UV Cure resins. Think of them as extremely fast curing epoxy without the mixing or the mess. All you have to do is squeeze them out of the tube, shine a UV light, and bam, they get rock hard within seconds. Instead of the blue pill, it needs a purple light. These resins are great for filling smaller voids and knots in your project where it's either too big for CA glue or you don't have days for epoxy to cure. While there are tons of options for UV resins on Amazon, here are two well-known brands. JD Diction comes in 3 viscosity, thin, medium, and thick, while Turtle Boat comes in 1 viscosity with a complementary UV light. The viscosity of the Turtle Boat is on the thicker side, while the JD Diction Thin can get into tighter spaces with much more ease. This supplied light from Turtle Boat works just fine, but it does take a few minutes to fully harden a pea-sized resin, which is kind of a hassle. This is a proper UV light that costs $60, and I measured it to be 20 times more powerful than the smaller one. With it, you can cure a modest-sized resin in under 30 seconds. While UV resins have been a great addition to my shop, there is one word of caution. We know epoxy will cure in the deepest parts of a wood as long as it is mixed properly and cures under recommended temperatures. Unfortunately, while trying to do a hardness test with just 30 seconds of UV light to cure this 1-inch deep hole, let's just say it wasn't enough. I made a heck of a mess on the inside of my bandsaw and the blade because only half of it was cured. But the good news is, when it is cured, UV resins are slightly harder than epoxy. Maybe plan on leaving the light on a little bit longer for some of the deeper voids. Speaking of fancy new technologies in woodworking, whether it's hard wax oils or UV cure finishes, both will benefit from a nano coat from Carbon Method. It creates a microscopic layer on the top of your finish for an additional touch of sheen you can see on the left with just one layer of hard coat compared against regular hard wax oils on the right. Once the finish is applied, you're left with a very durable surface that repels just about anything you can throw at it. I personally have been using this side table finished with Carbon Method for a few weeks now, and one of the things that I really love about it is how easy it is to clean just about anything off of it because nothing sticks to it. I'm telling you, these videos are not really going to do it justice because it's one of those products you kind of have to actually use and experience to fully appreciate. So I'll leave a link down in the description below for you to try them out yourself. Now, in order for us to fully appreciate UV Cure hard wax oils, we first need to understand what makes traditional hard wax oils so great. First, they are very easy to apply because all you have to do is trawl or buff the product on and buff them off. There is no need to develop special skills or spend tons of money for an HVLP spray gun setup. And hard wax oils leave a very natural and smooth feeling surface with modest levels of protection. They're easy to spot repair as well because you simply scuff up the surface again with a piece of sandpaper, wipe the coat on, buff it, and you're good to go. And despite the higher price tag per ounce when you compare it with something like polyurethane or lacquer, small amounts of hard wax oils provide a lot more coverage. Hard wax oils are also considered to be safer with less volatile organic compounds when compared against something like lacquer. In fact, when you look at it from the big picture, hard wax oils are the complete opposite of conventional HVLP spray finishes. UV Cure finishes has been used in industrial settings for decades and are just now beginning to surface in modest shops. These products claim all of the benefits of hard wax oils with the added advantage of instant curing. I don't know about you guys, but to me, that sounds way too good to be true. Surely there has to be downsides somewhere, right? So let's break down each of these categories and test it. There are 3 brands of UV Cure finishes that you can buy in the United States today. It is Vesting, Chemivere, and Cure UV. Apparently Rubio also makes a UV Cure finish, but it's not really available in the US market. In this video, I will be taking a closer look at the Chemivir and Vesting products. I'll leave a link down in the description below for you to check them out. They're not affiliate links and I'm not looking to make commissions on them, though I should give you the disclaimer that I have worked with Chemivir on my Instagram platform a few months ago, which is kind of what gave me the idea for this video anyway, but that obligation is now complete and they have no input on this video whatsoever. I personally do my best to give a fair perspective on this channel regardless of any relationships I may have with the brand, but based on what I have to say in this video, I will let you be the judge of it. When it comes to these finishes, it's really hard to convey time through a video like this. These UV finishes cure within seconds, not dry to the touch, actually cured, and can be used as a piece of furniture right away. So instead of me talking about it, let me show you real time so that you can appreciate the time along with me. I've got some finish on a non-woven pad here that I will buff deep into the grains of the wood, and then I'm going to wipe it with a clean pad and hit it with some UV light for a few seconds. And it is already, at this point, cured enough to sand immediately. You can apply as many coats as you like, but I find 2 coats is plenty. Both Vesting and Chemivir recommend sanding to 120 grit before applying the first coat, which is a little different from hard wax oils that typically require higher grits of sanding, so you can save a little bit of time here. And then once the first coat is applied, you can sand between coats with 300 to 400 grit, apply the new layer, and you're good to go. So as far as ease of application goes, both Chemivir and Vesting, I would say, are pretty much on par with traditional hard wax oils and significantly easier than an HVLP setup. Unlike most film finishes where the concept of spot repair means sanding the whole thing down and refinishing it again, UV Cure hard wax oils are super easy to spot repair. All you have to do is scuff up the area with a 400 grit sandpaper, buff on some finish, clean up the excess, and hit it with some UV light, and it looks as good as new. The big advantage with the UV Cure finish is that once the spot repair is done, you don't have to baby it. It's actually cured enough and you can start using it immediately. So far, the ease of application and spot repair has been in line with hard wax oils, but how does this stuff actually look on wood? So I made a sample board consisting of maple, sapele, and walnut to represent the light, medium, and darker woods. I have 4 sample pieces that consisted of Vesting, Chemivir, Rubio, and Deft nitrocellulose lacquer. I applied 2 coats of each product following manufacturer recommendations and cure times. So looking side by side, can you guess which finish is which? I can tell you one thing that you might not be able to see and appreciate through a video. The Vesting and the Chemivir product feels so silky smooth to the touch. It's really, really nice. It does have a slight build, but it doesn't feel anything like a film finish. The Rubio, of course, as you probably imagine, feels the most natural, almost as if you're touching the raw wood. The lacquer obviously feels like you're wearing a condom, but offers great protection, as you will see later in the video. In terms of clarity and look, the Rubio stands out on the lighter woods, causing way too much of an amber tone on the maple. Both Chemivir and Vesting does a great job of keeping the maple closer to its natural white tone without much ambering. Surprisingly though, the lacquer isn't actually too far behind. The darker woods look absolutely great on lacquer and Rubio. However, it's important to know that both of the UV Cure finishes does slightly subdue the rich and dark tone of the walnut. But the difference is so subtle that if it wasn't for like a side-by-side comparison in front of me, I don't think I'd really be able to tell them apart. Now, one of the things that is unfortunate, in my opinion, is the Chemivir product. If it's not buffed completely off the pores of the darker woods, from certain angles, you can see a lighter tone in the pores if you get really up and close. The Vesting product, on the other hand, is more clear and it doesn't really have this issue. You could argue that I should have done a better job of buffing the finish off the grain, but it really shouldn't have to be buffed that hard in my opinion. So if you use a lot of walnut or dark woods, this might be a little bit of a deal breaker for you, but the Chemivir product also makes a variety of pigmented finishes that Vesting does not, and in that case, the pore filling phenomenon is actually an advantage, especially if you're trying to achieve this new fad of Rubio cotton white on white oak. Now, I'm gonna level with you guys here because it is incredibly difficult to objectively measure the durability of a woodworking finish because there's literally thousands of ways to do them. Having experience with these products, having lived with the furniture in your home, it just gives you a much better indication of durability than anything that I can test. Now, with that being said, let's at least try to compare their durability because we have the ability to put them under the same conditions. I'm going to tape each sample pieces into 3 sections. These sample pieces are a little bit too small for a full sweaty water cup test, but I'm going to substitute that with a wet paper towel to look for water damages. The second section will get a squirt of ketchup, which is a high acidic content. And the third section is for the clumsy coffee lovers like myself. After 12 hours has passed, here is what we get. Starting with the espresso, you can see minor staining across all of the finishes on the maple. It is impossible to see espresso damage on sapele and walnut. Everybody gets a pass on the ketchup test. The wet paper towel test was a little bit more interesting because while you can't really see it with your naked eye, if you run your fingers on it, the finish feels normal on the lacquer and the vesting sample. And unfortunately on the Camembert and the Rubio, there is a rougher texture that feels like the grains were raised ever so slightly from water penetration. I can verify this by wiping a wet towel again to see where the water sticks more. So when it comes to wet towels or forgotten sweaty cups, Rubio and Camembert might take the most damage. Now, I tried my best to do some kind of a scratch test, but honestly, it would be kind of stupid to do them because I don't think I'm capable of testing it in a way where the results would be accurate and meaningful enough for me to share it with you guys. You know, all finishes will scratch and they will wear over time. And while lacquer is probably the hardest finish, it's a pain to repair. And the fact that Rubio and UV Cure products can spot repair easily, that should be factored into the equation. Having played with these finishes though, for a couple of months, I would consider the UV Cure finishes to be slightly more protective than Rubio, but you kind of have to take my word for it. When it comes to health and safety, it's no secret that conventional film finishes like lacquer has a stupid high amount of volatile organic compounds, also known as VOCs. Generally speaking, many VOCs are toxic to the human body and you always want to wear a VOC-rated respirator with a good seal when working with woodworking finishes. I'll leave a link down below with my favorite masks if you're looking to get a pair. To test the volatile organic compounds, I'm applying a small bit of Rubio monocoat on a sample piece of wood, placing it in a box with a VOC sensor on it over the course of 10 minutes. The results are actually pretty decent with a very small amount of VOCs being emitted from the finish. For comparison, this is what lacquer looks like as it maxed out the sensor within 1 minute mark. Vesting falls very much in line with Rubio and Camembert seems to emit slightly more VOCs than the two. Now, there is one major difference though when it comes to the UV finishes in this case, because all of these UV samples put in this apparatus are fully cured, as in they've already released all of the VOCs they ever could. While on the other hand, the lacquer and the Rubio monocoat would continue to emit VOCs over the course of days and weeks. So in that context, the UV Cure finishes, especially the vesting product, is among the lowest volatile organic compounds that I have measured in pretty much any woodworking finishes that I have personally tested. So when you're looking at this from the bigger picture, right, you might say, well, UV Cure finishes seem fantastic, Suman. Why isn't everyone using this stuff? The simple answer is cost. Maybe, because while the vesting and Camembert finishes themselves are comparable in price to something like Rubio, this UV light cost $1,000. And I've gotten some quotes on slightly bigger and more powerful lights that are $2,000 to $4,000. I hope you realize that I'm not going to be sitting at this tape workbench and tell you to try this out, knowing that the barrier to entry is unaffordable by many. So let's make it cheaper, a lot cheaper. But you have to buckle down a little bit because it gets a little technical and I'm hoping your wallet will thank you for it. So both of these finishes require ultraviolet light, more specifically 395 nanometer wavelength. They both need roughly 450 milliwatt per centimeter squared of total ultraviolet radiation energy to fully cure and harden. So if you're trying to save a buck and you're trying to find UV lights on Amazon, maybe at 395 nanometer, you'll see something like this 150 watt or 300 watt model. For comparison, this $1,000 light is rated at 50 watt. So how do they compare? At 6-inch distance, the 150 watt produces 8 milliwatt per centimeter squared, and the 300 watt produces 16 milliwatt per centimeter squared. And the small 50 watt gun produces 55 milliwatt per centimeter squared. While their spread pattern is different from each other, comparing the wattages of the UV lights is a little meaningless because these bigger lights use a different technology and spend a lot of the energy producing heat, while the compact one is far more efficient. But you can't argue $33 versus $1,000, right? So at 8 milliwatt per centimeter squared output, you'll need to expose the same spot of wood for almost a minute to fully cure with these 150 watt light. If you bring the light a little closer to 3 inches, you can cut that time in half. If you remember at the beginning of the video, I recommended you get this flashlight for resin curing, right? While it does not have the best spread pattern, it is incredibly powerful. And if you make small items, 5 to 6 seconds of exposure from this light is enough to cure your project. All of these lights are viable, cheaper options that you should consider, but we can make it even cheaper. So you might be asking, what is cheaper than $33? How about free? That's right. That free thing is sunlight, at least for now. So the sun emits ultraviolet rays, including the wavelengths that we need to cure these finishes. It does need to be in direct sunlight and not reflected or diffused through a window because UV rays starts to fizzle out at that point. But even on a late winter, early spring day in Western New York, I was able to get 2.2 milliwatt per centimeter squared, and I waited for a slightly nicer day and got 3.5 milliwatt per centimeter squared. But does this actually work in the real world? And in order for us to test that, we need to get it to 450 milliwatt per centimeter squared, which is what these finishes require, right? And so that means we have to expose the finish to the sunlight for a little more than 2 minutes. I decided to use 3 minutes just to be safe. Both the Chemivir and Vesting looks great so far, and when I sand it, it powders up nicely without any tackiness, which tells me that the finish is properly cured. While the sun baking method may not be practical for all types and shapes of furniture, if it's something like a tabletop, the sun is actually faster than using the handheld light because the 5x5 working area of this $1,000 light will actually take longer to cover the entire surface than just shining 3 minutes of sunlight. The UV Cure resin and UV Cure finish are going to be a staple in my shop going forward, and that says a lot from a guy who loves spraying nitrocellulose lacquer. You know, being able to go from applying a finish to a piece of furniture to delivering it or installing it in the same day, that is some mind-blowing futuristic stuff that you can start doing it now, today, hopefully cheaper because of what you learned in this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.